Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you do not miss any video lesson from RAU'S. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to analyze the Hindu dated 8th of May 2020. In our series to introduce to you RAU'S ELEARN platform, today we are going to talk about the resources which are available for one and all. In this context, one of the important things that we need to highlight is that DNS is available free for all, and you have the luxury to see all these videos either in the thematic form or in the calendar form. We normally get a lot of requests to organize our content on YouTube in terms of playlist. Here you can see that all that content is already listed in terms of playlist. At the same time, you can also choose the other view, that is calendar view as well, in terms of the post which is done date wise. So you can see here that in the month of May we have updated these videos, and these are available for all of you in terms of what you want to see. Now another significant point that is very important for all the learners is that whenever you click to any video, you can see here on the right hand side, you can see all the topics are listed in terms of playlist. Suppose someone wants to go to remittances directly, the person can go to remittances directly and understand the concept or the discussion accordingly. At the same time, you can see here there's a button for notes as well. And the next important thing is there is prelims quiz as well. So all the questions which are available here in terms of discussion are also available in terms of quiz. So what you can do, you can attempt the quiz beforehand and see how well you understand these concepts. And then you can participate in the discussion and understand where you need to develop more conceptual clarity. Just as we talk about prelims practice, similar practice is also available for DNS as well. Here you can see that in DNS, the video window is here, and on the right hand side of the video, you can see here all the topics which are discussed in terms of topic, subject, and the subtopic. So you can see here there are notes as well, which you can download directly. At the same time, you can see here the prelims quiz as well, which you can attempt, and you can see solutions as well. Suppose I have attempted this question, you can see that I chose option B and option D is the correct answer. So here explanation in terms of countries which share border with China is very clearly highlighted, and in this fashion you can develop better perspective if you have gone through the topic and gone through the quiz. So DNS and prelims practice videos are one of many things which are available for free for all of you. At the same time, you can go and click on study material, and you can see here the Focus magazine is also available for all of you. You can download this book and use it even when you're not connected to internet. Apart from that, DNS revision multiple choice questions of all the topics are also available on this platform, which are free for all of you. You can download these documents, attempt the questions and prepare for the UPSC examination in a better fashion. So these are some of the benefits that you can utilize for the purpose of preparation for the coming examination. And when we talk about the RAU'S ELEARN platform, this platform is a very potent tool for all those who are seriously preparing for the service examination. Displayed on the screen is a list of articles that we are going to discuss today. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description of the video. Let's begin our analysis. Page number 7 of today's newspaper highlights a news item which talks about water wisdom during pandemic. Now this article basically relates to World Water Day, which was celebrated on 22nd of March. However, the impact of this particular celebration was very limited because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now in this context, the author basically highlights that more awareness is needed on climate resilient action like protecting carbon sinks. In this particular system, we need to understand water as a system. Now in this context, we have presented a water cycle here on the right side of the screen. Now the idea of presenting this water cycle is very simple. We want to highlight how the water system basically works. So you can see here on the top there is snow or ice which is melting continuously in terms of glacier, and the red line just below these white mountain peaks, you can call them as snow line. Snow line are those areas which are permanently covered with snow. So you can see that this is what the snow line is all about, and then there are glaciers which are causing snow melt runoff, and through this snow melt runoff we can see that there is surface runoff which is like river. At the same time, there is a system of ponds and lake as well which is filled by precipitation. Now, as far as the top snow line is concerned, this is basically done through snowfall, and this is how this is entirely covered in white snow throughout the year. The snow melts and it feeds the rivers, and these rivers basically fill different kind of water bodies. These water bodies are also filled by cloud precipitation as well. Now, once this entire water flows, it goes to ocean, and here again the evaporation process kicks in, and ultimately we can see here the clouds are being formed. This process is continuing, and this is how the water cycle is working. And that is why we have termed water as a water system. Here we can see it in the form of cloud, we can see it in the form of snow and ice, we can see here in the form of surface flow. At the same time, there is groundwater, and then there is ocean as well. Now, in this context, what authors have highlighted that the choice of theme for this year's event, that is 22nd of March, was water and climate change. And this basically reflected the desire of policymakers to address the impact of climate change on water sector. Now we need to understand that water is the primary medium through which climate change impacts. This impact basically trickles down to the community and to the individual level, primarily through the reduced predictability of water availability. Now, in this context, what we need to do is to understand how climate change is impacting the water system. And since we are talking about water system, we'll be focusing on snow, ice, surface runoff, underground water, and the ocean water, as well as water in the air as well. The most relevant point for us is to understand how climate change is impacting the water system, and hence it is important for us to understand each element of water system. In this context, let's first focus on the sea level. The mean sea level has been continuously rising since the past 2 decades. You can see here in the table which is given, the current rate of change is around 3.3 millimeters per year. And when we talk about this particular kind of rate of change, the rate of change was nothing significant till 1995. And since then, it has been increasing continuously, which is a cause of concern for all of us. The reason for this is very simple. We are witnessing climate change, and the extent of climate change is greatly affected by global warming as well. This global warming is leading to conversion of snow and ice into water, and hence sea levels are rising. Second important aspect is warming of ocean itself. Now we are aware of the fact that ocean does an excellent job in absorbing excess heat from the atmosphere. The top few meters of ocean stores as much heat as the Earth's entire atmosphere. So we can see the kind of impact ocean has in terms of managing the heat of the atmosphere. As the planet warms because of global warming, it is the ocean that gets most of the extra energy. And this is going to have lasting impact in terms of ecosystem, flora, fauna, and availability of water in terms of predictability as well as change in the sea level. And that is why this entire system is very important for us to understand. The next important element for which we need to talk about is shrinking of cryosphere. Now when we talk about cryosphere, this is that area of Earth which is covered with ice all the time. Now apart from that, we also need to focus on shrinking of ice sheets. Now as the global warming is increasing with each passing day, the Greenland and Antarctica ice sheets have been decreased in mass. You can see here on the table given on the right hand side, Antarctica mass variation since 2002, and you can see here the rate of change. The rate of change is phenomenal in nature. It is 127 gigatons per year with a margin of plus minus 39. And this is huge in terms of loss of potable or drinking water. Another related aspect of this increased temperature is frost-free season and growing season will lengthen. Now some of you will believe that this is a positive sign, but actually in the overall context this is very negative in nature. At the same time, we need to understand when ice sheets are shrinking, there are more land available in Russia, Canada, and many other countries and poles in which they can have more access to cultivable land. So these are more of a short-term benefits which basically impede our long-term vision for the planet as such. The length of the frost-free season and the corresponding growing season has been increasing since 1980s. Apart from this, glacial retreat has also become a great problem. Now when we talk about glacial retreat, glaciers are retreating almost everywhere around the world, and which includes Alps, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, Alaska and Africa. Now, one of the aspects that is related to glacial retreat is that in the initial stage, the water in the river increases. The reason for this is simple. As the glacier is retreating, it means the rate of Conversion of the glacial ice into water is fast. It means that the flow in the river will increase. But in the long run, as the glacier retreats and the ice cover is decreased, then these perennial rivers, which feed billions of people, will go dry. And that is a very important concern that we should address immediately. In this context, the table on the right hand side clearly defines that average September extent. You can see that the rate of change is around 12.85% per decade. The next important point is ocean acidification. Now, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the acidity of the surface water has increased by about 30%. Now, you must be aware of the fact that acidity is basically measured in terms of pH value, and if pH value is 7 or less, it is considered as acidic. At the same time, when pH value is more than 7, that is 7 plus, it is basic in nature. You can see here the diagram that when we talk about ocean pH, in 1850s the ocean pH was 8.16. So it was more basic in nature. At the same time, in 2005, this value was 8.05, and it is expected that by 2100, that is by the end of 21st century, it will be 7.85, which means that the basic pH level of the ocean is decreasing, and this is going to have lasting impact in terms of the ecology and ecosystem of the ocean itself, and there will be impact on other elements as well, as this water element is around 70% of this entire earth. Apart from this, we are also aware of the fact that there is a considerable increase of humans emitting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and hence more being absorbed by oceans as well. The amount of carbon dioxide absorbed by upper layer of ocean is increasing by about 2 billion tons per year. You can see here in the table which talks about dissolved carbon dioxide. In 1850, the level was around 398.1 micrograms per kg. In 2005, this increased to around 529.9, and in 2100 it is expected to reach to 926.7. And you can see here from 1850 level to the level of 926, this is around 2.5 times. This is significant in terms of the kind of impact it will have on ocean, and it will have lasting impact on each element of water system. So this brings us to the very important part, what we need to do. Now this brings us to the most important question, what we really need to do to solve the kind of problem that we have started to face and which will increase in the future as well. Now there are many things that governments are doing, at the same time they are very ill equipped to deal with the magnitude of the problem. Planning of water resources must be given due consideration while dealing with climate impact. And this is what the crux is, what author wants to highlight in this particular article. What we need to do is to revisit our rich tradition and culture of water wisdom in water resource management. In order to achieve this goal, we need more public awareness on the need of climate resilient actions, which includes protection of carbon sinks like oceans, wetlands, peatlands, and mangroves. We should be very judicious in our usage of water, and this is important not only for the survival of this generation but also for the coming generation. On the page number 1 and page number 6, there is a news which highlights Vizag gas leak claims 11 lives, over 350 hospitalized. In the editorial, this news is covered under toxic disaster. Now, India as a country has seen many industrial disasters. In this case, Bhopal tragedy, which took place on the nights of 2nd and 3rd December of 1984, is considered as one of the worst tragedies that struck the independent India. Now, yesterday's news of Vizag gas leak, which claimed 11 lives, is a grim reminder of Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984. In the Vizag gas leak, styrene gas was released in Visakhapatnam plant of LG Chemicals. As already mentioned, 11 people have lost their lives and more than 350 are hospitalized. Now, from the perspective of the examination, we need to know what is styrene gas. As defined, styrene is an inflammable liquid that is used in the manufacturing of polystyrene, plastics, fiberglass, rubber, and latex. Now, when we talk about the presence of styrene gas is found in many emissions, which includes vehicle exhaust, cigarette smoke, and in natural foods like fruits and vegetables. Now, we need to understand why this gas leak has caused. the death of 11 people and over 350 people are hospitalized. In this context, we need to understand the short-term exposure to the substance can result in respiratory problems, irritation in eyes, irritation in mucous membrane as well, and in gastrointestinal issues. And if you talk about the long-term exposure, this could drastically affect the central nervous system and lead to other related problems like peripheral neuropathy. It is also said that this can lead to cancer and depression in some cases. However, the link between styrene gas and cancer has to be conclusively proven, which has not been proved so far. Now, one of the things that you need to understand that when we talk about the styrene gas release in Visakhapatnam, it is still unclear at the moment whether the deaths are due to direct exposure of styrene gas or one of its byproducts. Why this doubt has been raised? Because the gas is considered to be non-poisonous and only fatal when exposure for long duration is done. Now, another thing that you need to understand about this tragedy is that styrene gas or any of its byproduct might have caused this kind of a problem. At the same time, it is maintained that styrene gas is non-poisonous in nature. It can become fatal only when the exposure is for a very long duration. And hence, in this context, more study is being done. In the context of the news, you should also know more about the Bhopal gas tragedy, which was caused by the release of methyl isocyanate, which is also called as MIC. This gas was released from the pesticide plant of Union Carbide, which is now known as Dow Chemicals. Methyl isocyanate is considered to be extremely toxic gas, and if its concentration in the air touches 21 parts per million, it can cause death within minutes of inhaling the gas. Now, this accident of Bhopal gas tragedy took place in the month of December in 1984, but one of the outcomes of this particular disaster is that government enacted Public Liability Insurance Act of 1991. And through this act, the government has made it mandatory for the industries to get insurance, and the premium which is paid for the insurance by the companies is used for Environment Relief Fund to provide compensation to victims of Bhopal-like disaster. So when we talk about this particular topic of gas leak, this is important from the perspective of coming prelims examination as well. At the same time, you should also be in a position to relate to the previous disaster that India has faced, which is about Bhopal gas tragedy, which led to the release of methyl isocyanate. Page number 16 of today's newspaper highlights a very important news from the perspective of coming civil examination. It talks about band-like clouds seen over sun's neighbor. The subheading of the article highlights they were found in the latest study on one of the pairs of binary brown dwarfs. Now, in this context, it is important for us to know what are brown dwarfs. Now, in order to understand what is brown dwarf, let's first try to understand the difference between a star and a planet. Now, the first point that differentiates star from planet is stars have their own lights. And when we talk about planet, planets shine because of the reflected light. So there would be a star which actually is throwing light on the planet, and the planet shines because of the light thrown by the star. So it is reflected light. Now when we see these celestial bodies like stars and planet in the sky, it is actually very difficult to differentiate between a star and a planet. So what other factors are important in this context? The stars are formed because of the contracting gas like hydrogen, and since there is a thermonuclear reaction going on, these stars have a very high temperature. And when we talk about the planets, planets form from the small particles of dust left over from the formation of star. These particles collide and stick together. There is never enough temperature to cause particles to fuse and release energy. In other words, planet is not hot enough or heavy enough to produce its own light. So these are the three basic points of distinction between star and planet. And when we talk about the brown dwarf falls in between a star and a planet. Brown dwarfs are objects which have size between that of a giant planet like Jupiter, but when we talk about Jupiter, it is actually 15 times the mass of the Jupiter, and it can be as big as 75 times the mass of the Jupiter. So if we want to classify any celestial body as brown dwarf, we'll be looking at the size in terms of Jupiter's reference, and we would be looking at a size of minimum 15 times the mass of Jupiter, and the maximum range is 75 times the mass of Jupiter. So this is where the brown dwarf basically lie. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this range is that the object would not be able to sustain fusion. Now, the point is that is highlighted in the last part that we have contracting gases and this leads to very high temperature. Now, stars are very massive body in comparison to a planet. Now, brown dwarf are very massive, but at the same time they are not massive enough to sustain thermonuclear reaction as seen in the star, and hence the brown dwarf is also called as failed star. Now, in order to clarify why it is called a failed star, it has a lot of mass but not enough mass to sustain thermonuclear reaction, which can lead to energy. So it lies somewhere in between star and a planet. Now, when we go to the article again, it highlights binary brown dwarf. Now, in this context, let's try to understand what is a binary star. Now, for understanding the concept of binary star, we'll be focusing on the image which is presented on the screen. Now, here you can see that there is a body, celestial body 1, and there's another celestial body, and there is a difference in their brightness as well. Now, please pay attention to this fact and let's try to understand what are binary stars. Now, binary stars are two stars orbiting a common center of mass. So, you can see here there are two binary stars and these are orbiting around a common center of mass. The brighter star is officially classified as the primary star. So, you can see here this star is brighter in nature and hence it is called as a primary star, while the dimmer star of the two is called as secondary and these are classified as B. So in this context, if we want to define which one is A and B, we can see that this would be A and this would be B. At the same time, there is a possibility that both the stars are equally bright. In such a case, the designation given by the discoverer, means a person or astronomer who has discovered this binary star of equal intensity, his or her idea would be respected. So whatever name the discoverer want to give, that will be allocated to that set of binary star. Now, when we talk about the binary stars can be classified based on their orbit. The first type is called as wide binaries. Wide binaries are the stars that have the orbit that keep them spread from one another. So there's a gap or difference between them. These stars evolve separately, that is a defining element, with very little impact from their companion. So what we can understand from this is when we talk about binary stars, which are wide binaries, what would happen? The stars will emerge, but they will be very far off. And since they are both far off, there would be very little impact on each of them in terms of these binary stars of A and B. The second types of binary stars are called as close binaries. These evolve nearby and are able to transfer their masses from one to another. The primaries of some close binaries consume the material from their companion, sometimes exerting a gravitational force strong enough to pull the smaller star into it completely. So these are the two types of binaries that we need to understand in this context. Now let's talk about the discovery that has been made. Now let us discuss what is being presented in the news item. A team of astronomers has discovered the closest known brown dwarf and it is called as Lumen 16A. What is important from the perspective of prelims examination is that it is the closest known brown dwarf. Second important thing that you need to know that this comes from a binary system. Since it comes from a binary system and we know that the name of one celestial body is 16A, it means the name of the second celestial body is Lumen 16B. Here you can also understand that out of these two bodies, 16A and 16B, 16A would be little brighter than 16B. Now there are more things important from the perspective of brown dwarf binary system. This binary system is around 6.5 light years away and it is also considered as third closest system to our sun after Alpha Centauri and Barnard's star. Both brown dwarf weigh about 30 times as much as that of Jupiter. So we have discussed about the range of mass and the range of mass normally ranges from 15 times the mass of Jupiter to around 75 times the mass of Jupiter. Another significant aspect is that both Lumen 16A and 16B have similar masses and their temperatures are about 1900 degree Fahrenheit or about 1000 degrees Celsius. What is also understood through the study is that both brown dwarfs were formed at the same time. However, there is a marked difference between the weather, and we can see here there are bands of clouds which are on this part. You can see here there is band of cloud, at the same time there is a band of cloud here as well, and this is what is being highlighted. It means since there are bands, it means there can be difference in temperature as well as difference in pressure as well. At the same time, it is important here to highlight that lumen 16b shows no sign of stationary cloud bands, instead of exhibiting evidence of more irregular, patchy clouds. So this is what the difference is between lumen A and lumen B. So these type of bands are found in lumen 16a. Now, how this entire thing is being observed, let me inform you. For this particular purpose, the polarimetry technique is utilized. When the light is reflected off the particles such as cloud droplets, it can favor a certain angle of polarization. By measuring the preferred polarization of light from distant systems, astronomers can deduce the presence of cloud without directly resolving either brown dwarf's cloud structure. So with this, we can see that this is not an observational phenomena in terms of looking at these brown dwarfs, but instead it is based on deduction through this technique. Now, in this context, it is important for you to know that NASA's upcoming James Webb Space Telescope would be able to study systems like lumen 16s to look for signs of brightness variation in infrared light that are indicative of cloud features. NASA will also launch Wide Field Infrared Survey Telescope, which will be equipped with coronagraph instrument that can conduct polarimetry and may be able to detect giant exoplanets in reflected lights and eventual signs of clouds in their atmosphere. So this observation is very important from the perspective of understanding multiple things. It is important from the perspective of understanding brown dwarf. It is also important from the perspective of understanding binary stars, and then what kind of a nomenclature that is being followed. Apart from that, NASA's James Webb Space Telescope and NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Telescope are also important from the perspective of coming prelims examination. Page number 11 of today's newspaper highlights a news item which talks about CSIR contributes to genome database. Now this particular topic is very important from the perspective of general science, and we have seen many questions in the previous years which come from genes, genome and DNA sequencing. In this context, let's try to understand all these concepts one by one. The first question that we need to answer right now is what is DNA? Now, in terms of full form, DNA is known as deoxyribonucleic acid, and it is a chemical compound that contains instructions needed to develop and direct the activities of nearly all living organisms. In terms of structure, DNA is double helical in nature. Here in the diagram, you can see the structure of DNA, which is double helical in nature. Now here it is also highlighted that there are some letters are there. These are very important for understanding. We'll be talking about these as well. Now when we talk about these letters, actually DNA strands are made of four chemical units which are called as nucleotide bases, which comprise of genetic alphabets. The bases are adenine, thymine, guanine and cytosine. Bases on opposite strands pair specifically. It means that A will always pair with T. You can see here A is always paired with T. Similarly, C is always paired with G, and this is what is highlighted. Now the interesting feature is that the order of A's, T's, C's and G's determine the meaning of the information encoded in that part of DNA molecule, just as the order of letters determine the meaning of the words. So in simple words, we can say that DNA is the repository of all the information that is needed to produce proteins and hence are the basic building blocks. Now this brings us to the second important part of definition, and that is what is genome. Now when we talk about an organism's complete set of DNA, it is called as genome. Now every single cell in the body contains the complete copy of approximately 3 billion DNA base pairs or letters of A, T, G, C that make up the human genome. With these four-letter language, DNA contains the information needed to build the entire human body. The gene traditionally refers to as unit of DNA, and this unit of DNA carries the instruction for making specific proteins or set of proteins. Now it is estimated that around 20,000 to 25,000 genes are there in human genome code for an average of 3 proteins. It is also very important to understand where this entire information is packed. Now, this entire information is packed on 23 pairs of chromosomes. And when we say 23 pairs, it means there are total 46. So, 23 pairs of chromosomes packed into the nucleus of human cells. Genes direct the production of the protein with the assistance of enzymes and messenger molecules. Now, when we talk about messenger molecules, these are primarily messenger ribonucleic acid or mRNAs. These basically carry information from the nucleus to the ribosomes in terms of which protein to produce. So, in simple words, mRNA travels out of the nucleus and into the cell's cytoplasm, where the mRNA is read by tiny molecule machines which are called as ribosomes. And this particular information, what these ribosomes interpret, is used to link together small molecules called as amino acids in the right order to form specific protein. So in simple words, we can say that this is nucleus where all the information is packed. From this nucleus, the mRNA basically takes information to ribosomes. Ribosomes read all this information and generate specific amino acids. These amino acids have to be produced in a specific order just to ensure that right composition is made. Now, when we talk about these proteins, proteins actually make up the body structure like organs and tissues, as well as control chemical reactions and carry signals between cells. If the cell's DNA is mutated, an abnormal protein may be produced, which can disrupt body's usual process and lead to disease such as cancer. So we hope that by this time you understand what is DNA, what is gene, the importance of chromosomes in terms of carrying information, then the significant contribution of messenger RNA and how messenger RNA is being read by ribosomes, which generates the amino acids. Now the next important point is to understand what is DNA sequencing. Now when we talk about any kind of sequencing, sequencing simply means determining the exact order of the bases in a strand of DNA, because bases exist as pairs and the identity of one of the bases in the pair determine the other member of the pair. In simple words, the A and T will always go together, and similarly C and G will always go together, and this is what the purpose is in terms of determining one base pair. So in a nutshell, researchers do not have to report both the base of the pair. If you can find one, you will automatically know what the second part would be. So what is the most significant aspect of DNA sequencing? First, we need to determine the exact order, and second, we have to define the identity of one of the bases in the pair, and this will help us in determining the sequence. Now this brings us to the important part of discussion, that is CSIR, that is Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, contributes to genome database. So let's understand what is genome database. The genome database is the public repository for genomic mapping data resulting from Human Genome Initiative. The primary objective of genome database is to make available to scientists an encyclopedia, the entire catalog of all the human genome that is being constantly revised and updated to reflect the current state of scientific knowledge. The genome database basically focuses on gene mapping, but as the genome projects move from mapping to sequence to functional analysis, the focus of this database will be much more broadened in future. And this is what is being highlighted in this particular news. Another significant aspect that we need to understand, that CSIR's Institute of Genomics and Integrated Biology, that is IGIB, which is located in Delhi, the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, CCMB, which is located in Hyderabad, and the Institute of Microbial Technology, which is located in Chandigarh, are currently sequencing the genomes of novel coronavirus. So we are aware of the fact that coronavirus has caused a lot of havoc, and Council of Scientific and Industrial Research and other agencies are actually trying to map the genome sequence of coronavirus as well. This is basically done to ensure that we get the treatment of this particular disease as fast as possible. The lead article on the page number 6 is conducting elections during pandemic. Now this basically talks about the unique situation that has arisen due to COVID-19 pandemic. Now you must be aware of the fact that in order to become a minister, it is not required or mandatory that you should be a member of Legislative Assembly or Legislative Council. But it is given that once you become a minister, then you have a period of around 6 months, after which you should be an elected member of either Legislative Assembly or Legislative Council. Now, in this context, what has happened in Maharashtra is very interesting. We know that Mr. Uddhav Thackeray is the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, but at the same time, he did not contest the election for Legislative Assembly. Now, the 6 months grace period for Maharashtra Chief Minister was about to get over in between this lockdown, which made it really difficult for conducting the elections. Now, in this context, the author has highlighted what is the need. Now, in this context, the author has highlighted the role of legislative councils, which is very important from the perspective of coming service examination. Now, since this article talks about legislative council, you should actually be focusing on this particular topic so as to prepare yourself for polity and governance and also from the perspective of current affairs. Now, in this case, I would like to highlight that when we talk about Legislative Council, on 28th of January 2020, Weber sir has clearly discussed all topics which are important from that perspective. He has talked about creation and abolition procedures of Legislative Council. He has talked about the states which have the second chamber. He has talked about the manner of elections for the members in terms of representation. And he has talked about composition of Legislative Council. Last but not the least, he has talked about the powers with respect to legislations, and there is a comparison as well in terms of the powers of Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council. Since this article has been done by Weber sir, what we expect you to go back on this article, what we expect you is to go back to the DNS of 28th of January 2020, for which we have put the link in the description. At the same time, in the PDF of this video, we have presented the entire article in the form of important points for Legislative Council. You are expected to go through the analysis done by Weber sir and keep the notes ready for the purpose of revision. Now let me help you in understanding what are the important things that you need to focus upon in the discussion that was taken by Weber sir. So you can see here, this is the DNS of 28th of January, where the topic has been related to a previous year question as well. Later on, the constitutional provisions and utility of councils in terms of argument for and against are also discussed. Here you can see in the second slide, we have discussed what all states have legislative council. We can see here UP, Bihar, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. These are the states which currently have legislative councils. Now in this context, what is the procedure to create and abolish has been discussed in detail. Apart from that, composition has also been dealt with. Now when we talk about composition, we can see that the distribution in terms of who will elect the members of legislative councils. So we can see here 1/3 of members are elected by MLAs, 1/3 of the members are elected by local bodies, and of the remaining 1/12 are elected by graduates and 1/12 are elected by teachers. Rest 1/6 are basically nominated for the people who have achieved distinction in a specific field. So this is again discussed in detail. So all these points which are important here are presented in the PDF, and you are expected to go back to the DNS of 28th of January 2020, for which we have also put the link in the description, and watch this video and understand the importance of Legislative Council. At the same time, you will in a position to understand what are the problems of Legislative Councils and how the powers of Legislative Council fare against the power of Legislative Assemblies. Now in this context, we'll be taking up questions in the quiz as well, so be ready to answer that question correctly. Page number 11 of today's newspaper, and there is a news heading which talks about US pat for India's role in Afghanistan. In this context, we have already discussed this topic on 30th of April 2020, in which we have discussed about Afghan peace and India's elbow room. Now today's news, which highlights India's role in Afghanistan peace process, is a mechanism where India is trying to make its presence felt in the US, Taliban and Afghanistan government peace deal. We all are aware of the fact that Afghanistan is a very important country in India's strategic interest, and hence India's participation in Taliban and Afghanistan government peace talks is very important. In this context, the news that is highlighted in today's newspaper is nothing but a fleeting glance only. You are expected to go back to the DNS of 30th of April 2020 and revise what we have already taught. Now with this, we come to the prelims pointers. Now in prelims pointer, the first topic that we have discussed is water wisdom. and we have shared many diagrams and graphs. You need to understand the information which is given in the graph, at the same time the projections as well. Also important is the various terms that has been used. For example, cryosphere. So these are important from the perspective of prelims examination. The second topic that we have discussed is all about styrene gas. It is a very unfortunate incident. With the release of styrene gas, many people have lost their life. At the same time, you should understand this topic in consonance with Bhopal gas tragedy. Also important here is to understand that gas, the composition, its symptoms, and how it influences the human body and mind. Third news that we discuss is band like clouds over sun's neighbor. Here we have talked about many information which are important from prelims examination. We have talked about binary star. We have talked about lumen 16a and lumen 16b and many other related terms. We've also talked about the closest star and other celestial bodies. These are important from the perspective of prelims examination. The next topic we discussed is CSIR contributes to genome database. In this sense, the study and understanding of DNA, the study and understanding of gene, chromosome, and DNA sequencing in terms of the concept is very important for you to understand. At the same time, we have also talked about messenger RNA and ribosome. So what are the functions of these various important components is important from the perspective of prelims examination. The next topic which is part of reference is related to legislative councils. You need to understand by which article legislative councils are created by the Constitution of India. What are the powers, what is the members available, and how the people are represented in this particular house. At the same time, you also need to focus upon the comparison between legislative assembly and also understand in terms of its comparison with the Rajya Sabha as well. So these are important from the perspective of prelims. The last topic, which is again part of reference, US PAT for India's role in Afghanistan, is more of a developing story. It is part of US Afghanistan relationship, and this is related more to the mains examination. With this, we have come to the question of the day. The question of the day reads: which of the following statements about legislative councils in India are correct? Statement number one: the powers of legislative council are at par with the power of legislative assembly. Statement 2: the member of legislative assembly of a state can become a minister in that state. Statement 3: the member of legislative council are elected for a period of 5 years. We have to choose the correct answer from the code given below, and the codes are option A 1 only, option B 2 only, option C 2 and 3 only, and option D 1, 2 and 3.